I hope this finds you well. Today we look at the First Amendment case of Snyder versus Phelps. It was decided on March 2nd, 2011, and the votes were 8-1, with Justice Alito dissenting in the opinion. The case concerned freedom of speech as it related to picketing and protesting, or demonstrating, if you'd like to call it that. The parties are Albert Snyder, father of Matthew Snyder, a Marine who passed away in service to his country, and Fred Phelps, the founder of the Westboro Baptist Church. The funeral at issue here was held in Maryland. The issue before the court was whether the First Amendment is a protection or a defense to the tort or personal injury of intentional infliction of emotional distress. So here are the facts. Albert Snyder was the father of Matthew Snyder, a Marine who was killed in Iraq, and he was burying his son in Westminster, Maryland. Notice of the funeral was provided in the newspaper, and Westboro Baptist got wind of it and decided to picket near the funeral. Westboro Baptist has been known for their strong feelings towards America and its soldiers and homosexuality. For over 20 years, they've picketed military funerals. At the time of this opinion, it was upwards of 600 or so funerals that they had picketed in the past. So Westboro Baptist decided to picket Mr. Snyder's funeral. It's a little unclear whether they were specifically picketing his funeral, but they were definitely picketing near his funeral. They were about 1,000 feet from the church. They were on public land. They complied with all the requirements of picketing and informed the government or police of their intention to picket, and they complied with police instructions. During the picketing, they didn't shout any profanity or do anything illegal. They peacefully picketed. So the funeral procession drove about 30 feet away from where the picket was taking place. And Mr. Snyder couldn't see the signs, but he did see them later that night. Their signs were very distasteful, glorifying the fact that soldiers are killed and that America is burning, basically. So Mr. Snyder watched the news that night, and that's where he got wind and saw these signs, and it deeply troubled him. So he brought suit against Westboro Baptist and Mr. Phelps, and he brought a couple of claims against Westboro. The one of particular interest to the Supreme Court was the intentional infliction of emotional distress, which was at issue in this case. The court had to answer the question of whether or not Mr. Snyder could recover for the intentional infliction of emotional distress because of the picketing, and whether that picketing, no matter how distasteful, is protected by the First Amendment. Ultimately, the court found that Westboro Baptist's picketing was protected under the First Amendment. So here's what happened. Mr. Snyder won at trial on a number of his claims, including the intentional infliction of emotional distress claim. He was awarded $2.9 million in compensatory damages and $8 million in punitive damages. However, this amount was later remitted to a total of $5 million. Westboro Baptist, or Phelps then, appealed the judgment, and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed, finding that the content of the picketing signs were protected under the First Amendment. Ultimately, the Supreme Court reasoned its way to the fact that the picketing was protected speech under the First Amendment, and that it could not be shown that the picketing was a direct attack at Mr. Snyder, because the father really didn't even see the signs until later that night, and the church members did not disrupt the funeral and stayed far enough away from the funeral. The court stated that whether speech is public or private is largely determined by the circumstances of the case, and when speech is of a public issue or public concern, then it's afforded that protection under the First Amendment. If it's a private matter, then it's less likely to have that First Amendment protection. So how is speech a public concern? Well, the court stated that if it can be fairly considered as relating to any matter of political, social, or other concern to the community, or when it is a subject of general interest and of value and concern to the public. Here, the picket signs concerned things such as the war in Iraq, September 11th, and other issues pertaining to homosexuality. Although the court's opinion doesn't wholeheartedly agree, and it points out how distasteful the picket signs were, it still found that even though the message may be less than what we feel is socially acceptable, it still awarded protection under the First Amendment, and ultimately that the speech was a matter of public concern and was located at a public place, even though Mr. Snyder argued that it was a private concern and a personal attack on him and his family as they were picketing near the funeral. Justice Alito dissented in this opinion, and he did not believe that Phelps and Westboro Baptist fall under the protection of the First Amendment, mainly because they brutalized Mr. Snyder during a time when he was burying his son. Justice Alito pointed out that the court has previously recognized that words by their very utterance can inflict injury, and that the First Amendment does not shield utterances that form no essential part of any exposition of ideas, and are of such slight social value that they're ultimately lacking in any benefit that can be derived from the speech. As always, thanks for watching. The full case is in the description, as well as definitions. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, share it, and subscribe, and leave me a comment below.